Since the Endangered Species Act was first passed in 1973, only about 3% of species have been delisted, not because they haven't recovered, but because the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and a variety of environmental groups have a vested interest in keeping them on the list. The gray wolf and the grizzly bear in Wyoming, as well as the gray wolf and the Preble's jumping mouse, are just additional examples of this. In fact, the greater Yellowstone grizzly bear has been recovered for well over a quarter of a century in Wyoming, yet we're still not able to get it delisted. Mr. Brian Nesvik from the Wyoming Game and Fish Department has been at the forefront of these recovery efforts for almost 30 years. He testified just a few months ago on the current state of the greater Yellowstone grizzly. Specifically, he highlighted the fact that the species has not only recovered far beyond the recovery threshold, but has also expanded far beyond its suitable range. Human-bear conflict potential has risen exponentially with this expansion in range. In 2020, nearly 8,000 square miles of grizzly bear range was outside of the designated management area, including on private lands. Just last week, a large male grizzly wandered within 20 miles of Billings, Montana. People now deal directly with grizzly bears that have wandered into rural and agricultural areas. These same people were once promised that the bears would not be allowed to permanently occupy the lands where they work, live, and recreate on a daily basis. And unless we choose to act, this promise will remain broken, and these populations will continue to expand completely unmanaged. The Fish and Wildlife Service, in fact, has found that the greater Yellowstone ecosystem is fully saturated with grizzly bears and that they exceed the numbers that are healthy for that particular area. Director Williams, considering the fact that the state of Wyoming has invested over $59 million in grizzly bear recovery and management, going from 136 bears in 1973 to over 1,100 currently, which is double the recovery numbers that was part of the recovery plan. Do you support transitioning to the Wyoming State Management Plan and delisting the grizzly bear?
Chairman Bentz, Congresswoman Hageman, as we've had these conversations before, I absolutely support the transition to state management, and at the same time, the Fish and Wildlife Service must adhere to the 5 factors for delisting for grizzly bears. And we had previously proposed delisting the greater Yellowstone ecosystem for grizzly bears, and the district court rejected that delisting. And now we have a petition before us from Wyoming where we are going through those factors and have to look at not only the numbers of the bears, but also the other factors of the statute. And we are doing that right now.
Ms. Williams, are you intentionally pushing grizzly bears onto private lands?
Chairman Bentz, Congressman Hageman, indeed, I am not pushing grizzly bears onto private land. As we know, many of these species do not distinguish between political boundaries or land ownership.
Well, I understand that, but that's why we have recovery plans in geographic areas and identify critical habitat and those sorts of things. You know, Mr. Vibert, I understand your frustrations. Washington, D.C. is full of people who don't understand the on-the-ground situation, whether it has to do with climate or weather or property or vegetation or water. And as a result, they oftentimes are making decisions that are not based upon the on-the-ground situation, but are actually counterproductive to recovery and protection of the species. And I've seen this in a variety of contexts. So again, I understand the frustration that you have with what's happening to your own property and your own situation. Can you provide us with a bit more detail about how you have been impacted by the Endangered Species Act?
Actually, right before I came in here, I got a phone call from Millborn Seed in South Dakota asking me how my purple coneflower looked this year. I have 110 acres of it. I was supposed to be the guy to put it out for the Monarch Corridor for this next year. And because everything in agriculture, and I know there's some here that are, you know, timing is everything. And we had a period where we had to stop our canals and then go off a live river flow because Wikieup had been completely drained. And I know we're going through a drought. My family's seen lots of them in 131 years, but nothing like this because we have something else sucking it down at a time when it's asleep in the ground. And so I had to tell them I'm not going to have the poundage for them that they wanted because it's a perennial crop and it didn't come up in time during our season. We have a very unique system, a microclimate, 85 degrees during the day, 30 at night. There's only one other place in the world, and that's in Chile, in the shadows of the Andes Mountains. It's going to cost me around $350,000 in lost revenue.
And also an impact on the monarch butterfly.
The gentleman's time has
Thank you,
expired.
I yield back.